Well, on my way back from the city. So much for finding a wicked backdrop for all you guys to see while I read and crank out a handful of emails from all the people who would appreciate them being shared. I might have to finally give in and read a handful of these from inside. Ugh, gross. But running out of time because I gotta go. It's just non-stop travel now and not being at home. I haven't been home in a few days. So that kind of sucks, but whatever. So I'm gonna go home right now. Word on the news, I've got that drive. I mentioned I dropped a external hard drive a little while ago. Slight drop from very, very low elevation, like below kneecap level. Dropped it and I phoned a few places in Vancouver while I was down there to drop it off. It's kind of funny. One Asian woman answered the phone. She goes, it sounded like it cost around $2,000 plus to maybe fix this for you. I'm like, really? And then I phoned another one and some other guy. It sounded like a Eastern European accented dude. And he said, yeah, if you could keep, he gave me an address, you come drop it off to me right now and we will sell you a container that we're gonna pack it in and then we're gonna ship it to Toronto for your free evaluation. I'm like, yeah, no, you're not gonna do that. Are you kidding me? Vancouver is basically the tech capital of Canada at this moment. It's kind of hard to believe that nobody can do a little data recovery here, right? Then I found another guy, and then we got the Aussie accent. And he, straight up dude, sounded like a pretty straight up dude. Told him what happened. He says, yeah, do you hear any funny noises coming out of the drive? And I'm sharing this for all of you so you understand what I had to go through or what you might go through to recover data. And I'm like, no, I don't recall any weird noises out of it when I fired it up. It just said it wouldn't read it on a Mac or on the other brand of computers. So it's okay. Well, it sounds like it's probably possibly a $350 or less charge, and you can bring it and drop it off. I said, okay, no problem. So I dropped it off. And then he phoned me back right away. His wife was there and I dropped it off. And then he said they had to crack open the plastic case. It was shorting out. So the thing was actually, it was an electrical short out that was screwing it up. So he had to tear the case apart and they're recovering the data that way. I'm like, thank you, baby Jesus. So there's literally, if I was to replace and remake all of the content in that drive, it would probably cost a couple $100,000. With all the flights, the different countries, the different states, provinces, the outdoor, everything. It's irreplaceable. It's ridiculous the amount of content in that drive. So, super news, I get that recovered. And I mean, you would not believe the stuff I have on there, from whales to bears to sea lions. It's underwater stuff, above water, mountains, bush plains, grizzly bears, everything. There's so much stuff on there, it's ridiculous. And that drive was meant to be the backup for all my content, and I bought another one identical to it, and I just hadn't quite flipped over to the other one for 2 copies yet. Right? Obviously I'll be making 3 copies as soon as I get that back from it. So I got that done. And there's all sorts of wicked awesome backdrop content in there that I could use for if I had to share stuff from inside. And at least you could look at all that cool shit, right? I might have something at home, I don't know, we'll see. But anyway, that is the report. We're going back east to New Brunswick for Christmas. So maybe I can make some videos back there. Who knows? Never been there before. But anyways, that's my report. And then for a handful of the videos that I just did put up on YouTube, and they're in black and white, well, I fumbled on the exposure. That was the only way to recover it without it looking absolutely really weird. And that was the reason for that. Black and white's always kind of cool anyway, though, right? But anyway, I am just before Whistler. Absolute storm. It's not stopping. It's been here for a few days. I haven't even checked the weather out, what's going to happen. I got horse feet to trim. I got a bunch of shit to do before I go. So I guess I'll have to do some emails from indoors and share them that way. Well, looks like I'm going to have to give in and share some emails from indoors. Oh my God, the day finally came. But I'll show, obviously I just showed a video of what the weather's like here right now. Really sucks, the big one. So, but I did pull over and I set up the camera on a tripod. Unfortunately, it doesn't have a gimbal. So it's going to be, almost mirrors every little frost upheaval mark on the highway. Our highway, the highway from Whistler to Pemberton is actually almost a glorified
high-end logging road. You can tell by the bumps and jiggles in the camera. But anyway, so I'm just going to let that video rip on here. You can watch what it's like to drive from Whistler to Pemberton as I share some emails. And see if we get caught up on a lot of these people who have sent them in. So what do we got here? Steve, I've never seen one of these creatures to my knowledge or experienced them. Because of this, some would say I am unbiased on the subject. I am a data analyst, computer scientist, if you will, and I've worked in the field for 40 years. Logic is second nature to me. Here's my analysis. I grew up in a small town and spent every waking possible moment of any time on my grandparents' farm near a state park. I hunted, fished, and even trapped in my youth. After all these years, you can take a small-town farm boy up the farm. He never really leaves. Many of us are hunters, fishermen, and trappers, at least in heart, though I have put them up years ago. It takes a different mindset to be one of these, let alone being successful as such. When I kick in the logic side of my brain, I begin to see things differently. Why do we hunt? We hunt for sustenance. We hunt for sport. We hunt for status among our peers. We hunt for conservation of unbalanced wildlife populations. We also hunt for research reasons, to learn the unknown or hidden. Unfortunately, there are those among us who hunt for more nefarious reasons. Some hunt for greed, sense of power, or puristic demonstration of our abilities. On the more sinister side of humanity, there are those who hunt for ritualistic reasons. In most cases, it seems they are after the essence of their prey. This is a dark side that repulses me, so I'll let it go at that. This is a dark side that repulses me, so I will let it go at that. These are a few reasons to point us in the direction I am suggesting. I'm sure there are other reasons to be added to this list, but you get my point. So looking at this from an empirical standpoint, things start to pop out. The very reasons that make these creatures unique in effect makes them a target. Most of us can recognize the physical characteristics of a big buck and what goes into that. Genetics, environment, behavior, social characteristics, physical characteristics, just to name a few. So if we think empirically along the known via eyewitness testimony, and by using our big buck example, here's what we seem to find. Genetics. Unique genetics that would literally change the theory of evolution. Environment. They seem to prefer isolated habitat capable of supporting a sustainable population numbers. However, with sightings being reported all over the place leads to the question of, are they expanding their territory? In some cases, they have received protective status. Behavior. Aloof behavior year-round. That mimics a big buck during hunting seasons, indicating they are hunted year-round. Social characteristics. Eyewitnesses have indicated family units, movement patterns, and rearing of young, all to be expected. Physical characteristics. Uniqueness of size in a biped, unbelievable speed and agility. Unique vocalizations of eminence power. Again, all to be expected. At this point, the aforementioned items above don't seem to rise to the level of total denial, or just plain silence on the subject, let alone the missing physical evidence throughout the years, by those in authority. If we look at history of the gorilla, the word gorilla comes from the history of Hanno the Navigator, c. 500 BC, a Carthaginian explorer. Take from Wikipedia and come to the attention of Western society in the 1860s. Not much has happened with the release of this information in terms of impact on humanity of this knowledge. One would expect the same results with the Bigfoot knowledge dumped by the powers in authority, but no such luck in terms of information on a broad scale. Why do the authority figures keep this information hidden to the best of their abilities? If we put on our Sherlock Holmes hat, it leads to two glaring points we may have missed earlier. Those points being intelligence and the supernatural phenomenalize. Either of those seem to make the authority figures skittish. So let's look there. Intelligence. Eyewitness testimony indicates the creature are masters of the forest. Omnivores of the first order. All indicator of a high intelligence. Just ask the indigenous people what it takes to live that kind of a lifestyle. But would that make the authority figures skittish? Somewhat, but not a showstopper for any information dump. Who would care in the long run? so it doesn't really add up to get the information freezed by the authorities. Okay, what's left? Supernatural phenomenalize. Well, that would make them freeze big time. But the whole damn thing on ice in terms of information till the next ice age thaw. That means we must be getting close. Okay, let's go full woo-woo, which is becoming a scientific term used by the elite scientific community when they find themselves in uncomfortable circumstances. Let's piss them off even more by pulling the supernatural phenomenalities from eyewitness testimony and taking a look at the implications. Shape-shifting, phase-shifting, and psychic abilities. Any or all of those explain the authority position on Bigfoot easily. Going back to the very reasons that make these creatures unique, in effect, make them a target. Who would go after them for their supernatural phenomenalize, if they had them? That's who would hunt them. Anyone interested in their psychic abilities, that's who. In order to look at supernatural phenomenalize, full woo-woo times 2, we need step into another dimension, one that is foreign to most of us, but there is eyewitness testimony in this area, whereas it may be. There are many deathbed confessions on the matter. There appears to be predators in those realms, and it is not a giant leap to say if they are intelligent being hunted physical abilities, their reasons could be similar to the aforementioned reasons stated earlier. End of my analysis. I am just a small-town farm boy who can read the signs and doesn't need to see an animal to know if it's around. Sincerely. P.S. Yes, it's an ugly topic, but it's logical and reasonable. That's what's scary. I would be curious to see what the indigenous peoples think in this regards. P.S.S. I prefer to keep my name silent on this matter this time. All right, thanks, man. Thanks for thinking out loud and sharing your thoughts with everybody. And I'm quite sure that this helps a lot of us who are seeking to get those missing pieces to our own puzzle as we try to figure out what's going on with this kooky ride called life. All right, well, that was a short one, but one that should induce a lot of thought, right? Let me squeeze another one in here while I've got everybody right here. All right, so this email starts off with, "Hey, Mike, I've been listening and watching your videos for a long time." So I'm going to assume that's a typo. That probably means, "Hey, Steve. I've been listening and watching your videos for some time now and enjoy hearing the vast amount of amazing stories to listen to that you share. I believe this story may be worthy of sharing with the listeners. This is how it goes. My friend and I spent a weekend camping at Rock Lake in Algonquin Park, Ontario, Canada. One summer about 5 years ago, we're using my green laser pointer to point at a ton of objects we observed moving about and flashing lights in the sky as if they were communicating with each other. So after this amazing experience, we left the beach at about 11 p.m. and hit the tent to sleep. It was a 2-room with a front screen porch for bugs. We settled in for the night, put the fire out and went to sleep. Sort of. I awoke to my zippers on the tent being open. At whatever time it was still pitch black out. I had my eyes still closed, thinking it was my friend next to me, who maybe woke up to take a leak. He enjoyed drinking, so he had a bit of a buzz on, and I thought it was him staggering over to the wrong side of the tent. And then I heard a long zip and another long zip. And you know when camping I like to meet the zippers in the middle. Anyways, I said out loud, "Hey Brad, wrong side bro." As I heard the zipping of the tent door opening, I repeated but louder, "Hey Brad, wrong side bro." As I heard the zipping of the tent door opening, I repeated but louder, "Hey Brad." No response. So I opened my eyes, and to my total, absolute, terrifying sight was some creature that looked like it was half in the tent, crouched down like a human would, that dropped something on the floor and was effing staring at my face to face with huge, glowing green eyes. I freaked out and slapped the tent floor and ground as hard as I could, and like a bullet this creature took off into the darkness with branches and shit breaking. Now, I have camped solo since, but not there. I can't even honestly say what the hell it was, but I never heard of an animal nicely opening the zipper of a tent. I'll tell you what, I was scared. Over the years of thinking what this could be, I narrowed it down in the cryptozoology category and ufology. Number 1, alien or ET entity. Number 2, adolescent Sasquatch. Final conclusion was whatever it was curious and looking at me. It did not harm me, but sure startled the shit out of me. Cheers, hope you like this true event story. Thanks for sharing. Blank blank, currently living in Edmonton, Alberta. I attached photos I took in an area called David Thompson County. It's an area known for Sasquatch sightings, and I solo hike here frequently, but have yet to see or hear any yet. All right, man, thanks for that experience. Pretty certain after you've been looking into this topic, there is absolutely no shortage of people who've had these things stick their head in their tent. And I haven't had anything like that happen. I've had grizzly bears inside my tent, black bears and stuff, but that would really, really suck. And that'd be a real nasty, sobering eye opener if you didn't have any experience with these beings previously, right? Or the knowledge about them. That would really be something else. But anyway, I'll cut this one short. You guys can digest those two experiences and the thoughts of the first email in this video, and I will get back to it shortly and share some more on this rainy, nasty, snotty day. Actually, all right. Here's another one. Hi, Steve. Hi from England, Steve. I have a minor Bigfoot encounter story for you, but it has left an enduring impression on my wife and myself, as this was a shared encounter over your way in BC. This simple encounter, however, has left us with a fascination for the truth, whatever that is, about these beings, and after watching many channels about the subject, your channel does give an outlet for those who feel maybe embarrassed about this subject. We, who feel uncomfortable about speaking of it, even to our closest friends and family, and we are grateful for this community outlet in particular. One positive, however, is that it is one of the lasting, shared, bonding, and fascinating experiences of this husband and wife team. I hope those who share this kind of experience can be open enough with each other and find a positive bonding out of it too. I guess that's what your channel is all about, really. At the close, though, we know they exist and that's just the way it is, so we can't understand the lack of scientific and governmental acknowledgement. The question is whether this is deliberate or not. I'll keep an open mind about that, but even without that respect, I think that Bigfoot has become an industry in its own right with its own monetary-led corruptions. The story started with a trip to Enderby, BC, to see Simon, an old friend of mine from years gone by who moved over from England way back when and became a trapper. We, borrowing his RV, drove down to Aberdeen, Washington to see other older family friends and returned via Port Angeles and Vancouver Island. A memorable trip in so many ways. This was October 2001, and the early snows were already settling in the highlands. Simply while driving along the high passes, I forgot exactly which, along the border area, but it was lightly snowing. My wife, looking to her right, suddenly said, "Do you think that's a Sasquatch?" I looked over, beyond the hedge line, next to the highway, to some open snow-covered ground. Sure enough, there, clearly, was a walking dark figure, in the middle of nowhere, walking through the snow, away from the forested area, in the opposite direction of travel to which I was driving, just a few tens of yards away. It was difficult to say how big this fellow was, but he, an assumption, was hairy. There was no gun, no backpack, and no discernible clothing, unless it was full head-to-foot ghillie suit. And that was it. Yes, I said, I do believe it could be. Obviously, the sighting was for about a few seconds. There was neither fuss nor drama. We were safe enough, minding our own business. It felt very matter-of-fact. We were open-minded enough about these creatures anyway, as we were aware of the First Nations historical accounts and had seen enough TV as kids about it in mystery programs. I always felt these creatures had far more claim to existence than, say, the Loch Ness Monster, which, incidentally, I don't believe in. Later we camped in Harrison Hot Springs, not by design but by chance and needing to stop and sleep somewhere. We took the opportunity to swim in the modern indoor spring baths and talk to some very interesting locals who talked to these creatures walking down the street, all very much sounding like common occurrence. Simon moved back to Scotland, and we occasionally still talked to him about it. He never saw one, however his old Canadian trapper friend and mentor had. He thought they were the result of a released guerrillas having carnal knowledge of womankind back in the 1930s or 40s. I'm not so sure because these stories go back much further into First Nation history and folklore. I can imagine them being remnants of a population from the age of the saber-toothed tiger, etc. Those were big animals then, but that environment changed. However, as a close relative of humankind, these creatures could change to survive the new climate and become arboreal. Or maybe they always were arboreal and moved north as the ice sheets retreated, populating the newly formed cooler forests. That theory feels to me at least plausible. And that's it, Steve. Thanks for sharing this and for giving people this outlet. Truly once seen, even in our safe brief visualization, you can't unsee it. And you live with this compelling combination of fascination and slight embarrassment. Personally, I see it as just a part of the colors of life, so we find it no real problem in the great scheme of things. Once again, thanks. P.S. Y-fronts is British for close-fitting underpants, not boxer shorts. You might hear them called skitties, too, when joking. Trevor Langham, Yorkshire. All right, right on. Thanks for that email, Trevor. And I guess, in a way, it's lucky for you and your wife to have bumped into one of those where you were basically in my backyard. Something else, isn't it? And it's also something else that for some reason, whatever reason it is, there are some people out there who just don't want us to know the truth about these beings, and that's all there is to it. This is what happened to my buddy Mike Tucker and I in the spring of 1978. We were on an unsanctioned camping trip on the west side of Malpeque Bay. Okay, that's pronounced Malpeque Bay in Prince Edward Island, Canada, camping near the Boy Scout camp that we had both attended many times. We got dropped off on a highway miles from the camp so we could practice using our compasses and bushwhack our way back to the camp area. When we were about halfway to the camp, we found a tent fully set up that had not been used for a long time. When I walked around it, while looking for some evidence of why it was there but totally unused, I saw that the back wall was ripped in 3 slices, like it was slashed open with a very dull knife or something. We both found this very strange, considering it looked like it was set up months before and never used. We also found swales between the trees that were packed down like something slept there, but never had any footprints or anything around them. We could never figure out what slept in these dips. A few days later, we were exploring, and we were on a narrow beach area when this happened. I had a sudden sense of impending danger, and that tingling neck hair thing was starting. Mike was a few hundred feet ahead of me when I heard a snapping and hissing sound in the alder and spruce trees. I looked down the shore toward my buddy, and when I looked back at the spot where the sound was coming from, there was a fellow emerging from the clump of alders, and, as he moved out of the trees, I saw a mist was trailing behind him, and the hissing sound now had a weird static-like clicking sound. There was an odd smell in the air, like welding or the smell of a laser photocopier. I said, "Hey, what's up?" He did not answer, but kept walking toward the bay then. As he walked closer to the water, he turned his head to me and said, "They'll always trick you." I thought, what the living hell does that mean? Then I realized he was trying to warn me. His walk was animated like he was not in control of his body. When he turned his head, it was like a cartoon-like manner. It was as if his head was all he was in control of. He had a bewildered look on his face. As he moved past me, I could not really see the back of him much, only the weird mist trailing down the ground about 10 feet behind him. His shape was outlined by a black rolling coil of smoke that was rotating. Then there was the weird mist around him and behind him. I don't understand what could be happening to him, but then I realized at the time that I was leaning back because something was pulling me back towards him. And then I was overcome with the feeling that I was supposed to follow him, but this I resisted with all my will. At that point, I became nauseous and was struggling not to follow him and whatever this force was that he was caught up in. I watched him and this weird veil around him walk straight out into the water of the bay, and I saw his head go under as the mist lifted off the water and dissipated. Then the hissing and clicking sound faded away, and everything was calm. He never even thrashed or raised his arms at all. Nothing. Just nothing. It was like he accepted his fate. I was sitting on the sand at that point, like I was suddenly released from that thing. I felt weak and unsteady. It took all my strength to stand up and stagger back towards Mike. He was saying, come on, let's go," in a packed voice. My ears were not right either, and I had to swallow like I was in an airplane. I don't remember what happened for a little while after walking toward camp. I was so exhausted. I put up in my spruce bough bivouac an hour or more later, and Mike was not around, so I went across the dam to the main scout camp area, but no one was there. At first, until a man that I recognized as Scott Master from another town showed up, and I tried to tell him that a man walked into the water and drowned. He did not believe me whatsoever. Just then, Mike showed up, and this leader asked Mike what he had seen. Mike just stood there stunned, saying nothing, and would not talk at all. So the leader chastised me for telling lies and told us to leave the camp and go home. Mike would never acknowledge or talk about what happened that day, but after this event, he took a bad path and I lost track of him. I've never told this event to anyone until now. Watching a few of your videos has told me that you are one who understands. It affected my life. I was about to turn 14 when this happened, and I was a fearless, stubborn bastard for a young fella before this. I was far more cautious afterwards. I was also an amateur trapper for 2 years, and I felt there was something behind that clump of alders. The next day I went back to the spot, and there was absolutely no sign at all in or behind that clump of alder where I first saw the young man come from. Nothing was there except rabbit foraging trails. Nothing was there except rabbit foraging trails low in the grasses and saplings. But in front of the alders, footprints began out of nowhere and headed toward the bay, from high-heeled street boots that he was wearing, and from my own Vibram-soled hiking boot prints were plainly visible. My heel marks were sunk 4 inches into the sand, where I was leaning back, trying not to be pulled in behind him. The force it felt like it was behind me and in front, and could see mist forming above the sand in front of my own feet when this was happening. I watched the local newspapers that summer, and no story about a missing man turned up. This occurred across the bay from an active Canadian military base, now closed, that conducted anti-submarine tracking activities in the North Atlantic and 413 Squadron search and rescue operations all over eastern Canada. I later learned from a retired American military officer that the base also stored American nuclear depth charges and had a lot more going on than the citizens ever got told, and I've always wondered if this young man was connected to the base somehow. I've had to live with this all my life, although I blocked it out for a time afterwards. This young man was alive and conscious when going into the water, and there was nothing I could do. What has the power to do this, and who were they that he said will trick you? Steve, I appreciate how you deal with skeptics. Keep it up. Blank, blank. I'll leave your name out. That is quite the story. And I'm trying to picture myself going through that experience and what would I do with it, and who would I tell, and where would I send it. I haven't a clue. But if you are listening to me right now, I think I would possibly strongly suggest that you send this email to David Pilatus. And maybe even title it that Steve Isdall told you to send this, forward it to him to up the chances of him reading it, and possibly he may be interested in this email from you as well. All right. Wow. What an experience. And you know what? There's basically not much I can really say to that except share it for you and see if anybody out there listening to this right now has had something even remotely similar happen to them. And if you have, then possibly you could email it my way, and we'll share it with everybody and see if this may be a common denominator with a handful of people around North America or even the world. You never know, right? And let's just say it is. Well, how else are we going to find out, right? Let's just say the same experiences happened to 20 more people, or 50 more people, or 1,500 more people. How are we going to find out? How would we find out? I guess this is the way we're going to find out, right?